region of space into elementary units, okay, and take average activity of some region of space, okay, average activity in some region of space. So let me try to understand density. Let me try to understand density as a property, okay, and let me say that this elementary volume I am taking with to capture the average properties, let it be a shrinkable one. Let it be a shrinkable one. Okay. So in some cases, so if you have you are trying to reach, you are trying to devise the elementary property density with a kernel volume, which is elemental volume dV. Okay, and this volume size is changeable. Okay, you imagine like that. If you have a very small volume, if you have a very small volume, let me say that initially I have this volume. I have this volume only. So here I am only able to trap one molecule in this kernel volume, which means that if I am going to have a very small elementary volume, the density, which is mass per unit volume, would be somewhere here. Okay. Slightly I increase the volume of the kernel, I trap two molecules, average molecule. Similarly, I go on increasing this kernel volume. On an average, I get some value which is invariant after some time. Okay, so invariant after some time. So this dV, the elementary volume, kernel volume is changeable, and after some time I get a density which is of mean value. Okay, this is when you say that the continuum has existed, has been established. Okay, this is when you say continuum is established, because now you can treat matter being continuous. You can treat matter being continuous. So before this region, you cannot apply, you cannot think that matter being continuous, because as you see that you are not able to trap the average properties with that kernel volume. Okay. So essentially, when you establish continuum, it automatically goes without saying that you have established average properties of the fluid physics. Okay. So continuum is very important to detail equations of fluid. Why? Because unlike in solids, fluid particles are loosely bound, more so in gas. Okay, gas is also a fluid. Liquid is also a fluid. So more than liquid, gas has more loosely bound particles. So the establishment of continuum is very important to write the physics. Most of the equations that we write in fluid physics, incompressible flow, they are basically after establishing continuum for the medium. So then you may ask me, aren't there any physics which is not appropriate, or which is appropriate without continuum being established? There are physics which are appropriate without continuum being established. For example, you consider moving up into outer space from the ground level up to 12 kilometers. You have atmosphere as the way you see it now, and that too with reduced density of matter. So beyond 33,000 feet, which is near about 11 kilometers, you see that the matter is very discrete. Okay, and if you want to write fluid dynamic equations, fluid physics, there it is possible, but not with continuum physics. Then you may require another type of physics, which is based on kinetic theory of gas, which will treat molecules per se. Okay, see, so here I would say that before continuum, kinetic theory is applicable for fluid physics. Okay, so there is a region of consideration from which continuum is applicable, and there is a region of fluid physics where kinetic theory is applicable. Okay, so having said that, so now let me say that why grid generation is required. Okay, so as I told you, now most of the physics in fluids is of the type, the governing equations, I say the governing equations are the type partial differential equations, which we call as PDEs, partial differential equations. And as you see that differential equations are basically continuous functions. They can only detail continuous functions. Let me explain that in another way, which you'll understand. Okay. I'm trying to understand a property which is a function of x being a position or whatever it is. I'm trying to detail a property as a function of x. And at two different locations, they are connected by some function, which is fx, okay, which is fx. So at x1, I have a function, which is, if you track it, it would give you a value fx1. And at x2, if you track it, it would give another value, a function based on the position x2, fx2. So this is at x2, and this is at x1. So this will be how properties or any parameters will be related in continuum. Okay, if there is another location, it will be dependent on the information available on a previous location or a location on the downstream or upstream or downstream. Depends on whether the fluid flow is compressible or incompressible. Okay, that information should be available at a position based on the information of its surrounding molecules or particles or region of space, whatever it is. So any property that you're trying to relate will be related with each other through a function. Okay, then how to establish this function? Okay, how to establish this function? The basic way of establishing this function is through some expansion, which there are many ways. The easiest one would be Taylor series expansion. Taylor series expansion. Sorry?
Excuse me, what is the continuum in the graph that you have shown just now?
Sorry, which graph? This one?
Yes, sir.
No,
yes.
After continuum being, I was trying to tell you, after continuum being established, we can relate point functions with with values which is really nearby to it, or the neighborhood points. I was trying to tell you, now one point will be influenced by its surrounding point or the domain as such. There is no discrete element now. Okay. Are you able to understand?
Yes, sir. So that is the equation of some part of the continuum or the continuum.
Only after establishing continuum, you can write differential equations. This is what I am trying to tell you.
Okay.
If you want to find a solution for at a particular point, that solution is dependent on the field values which is surrounding them, and they will be related by some function. And I have given an example with two different points and trying to establish a function at a point x2 based on the function value at x1. This is what I'm trying to explain now.
Yes,
okay.
Sir.
So you'll come to understand why I am explaining all these things, because this is required to understand some of the things I would explain later. So let us see how this point function at x2 is related. If you go by just Taylor series expansion, it tells that the function at x2 would be related with the function at x1, okay, plus 1 by 1 factorial, the change in function over x, okay, delta x. Okay, so here this is delta x. How separated they are from each other. Okay, these 2 points. Then that is not it. You can go on elaborating it with further expansion series, the second order derivative. So you can think about having going up to whatever order you can take. Okay. So basically, you are trying to relate the information available at a point to find the information at a different point based on the separation here. Okay, the spatial location of 2 different points. So now, in some of the cases, if you have no enough computational power, you will go on neglecting this part of the higher order terms, because you see delta x being a small quantity, delta x square will be much smaller. So you can neglect higher order terms going to 0. You can just say that this is negligible. So you will be left with, so in that case, you will be left with a solution that is of first order accuracy. Okay. So you'll be left with a solution that is of first order accuracy, which means that first order accurate solution. Okay. In case you are neglecting higher order terms. So here you see that in order to find the value at a point, you need information at a particular point, and you need information of the slope or the change of the function with respect to the position. So it has automatically become a partial differential equation now. Okay. So the PDE automatically creeps into the picture. The partial differential equation automatically creeps into the picture. So now when you are trying to relate continuum physics, automatically partial differential equations come into picture. Okay. Now, because of this reason, all information between these 2 points are required for a solution. Okay. All information between these 2 points are required for the solution. You cannot have a discontinuity in the function, and you cannot predict field values based on discontinuity. This is not, in case of integration, there is no problem like this. Integration can be of discontinuous functions, but in order to have evaluation of differential equations, you need the function to be continuous. And continuum guarantees that, because there are the characteristics or fluid properties is now established without void in them. This is the continuum concept. Okay. So did you understand how Taylor series expansion gives you functional relation between 2 different points, information between 2 different points?
Fine, sir.
Okay. Okay. There are other methods also. I just mentioned only one. Okay. So here, the first one here, the grid generation, the entire domain is divided into finite divisions. Now here, the computer only works with discrete points. Computer can only work with discrete information available at discrete points. Okay. This is why, even though the function is continuous, you have to break the function. The value should be available at discrete points. The information should be available at discrete points before being fed to the computer. This is why continuous equations, partial differential equations, have to be broken down into linear algebraic equations, which are available, point by point solutions are available. This sort of information has to be fed to the computer. So first, you have to convert the governing equations, which are partial differential equations, to linear algebraic equations before computer can solve them, because computer can only operate at discrete values. Okay. So now there is a connect. You want to convert a continuous partial differential equation into linear algebraic equation, which is valid at discrete points. So automatically, as you see in the Taylor series expansion, for the example, I neglected higher order terms. So this neglecting of higher order terms actually goes into a part of your program when you write a program for your code. And this will cause errors. And this is called as numerical errors in your solution. Okay, numerical errors in your solution. So if these numerical errors are long or large, or if they are going to multiply as you go on computing, or they are going to amplify as they go on, you're going on computing, this will take you away far from the solution that you're looking for. This is why sometimes first order solutions will take you to the solution. Sometimes second order solutions will take you to the real solution. Sometimes you may require higher power expansion of equations to get you the solution. So first order solution is very easy for computer to solve, but they may not be numerically correct, because there is a large part of numerical error which you have humanly introduced by not considering higher order partial differential terms. Did you understand?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What is FDM here, sir?
Sorry,
FDM, grid generation.
finite difference method. Finite
Yes.
difference method. I'll come to that. I'll come to all
Yes,
those
sir.
things.
Understood, sir. That you told. Understood.
Yes. So now, as I told you, when you try to discretize so this is called as you want to create discrete points at which you can take information from. So you understood that you cannot solve continuous equations. You need discrete points to take information from, which is basically done through creating meshes, okay, or grids. You can draw the grid and you can ask the computer to pick the information from there, okay. So as I told you, if you give a very fine grid, the computer is going to take information from very close points, and you see that one point is relating information to another, and how close they are will give you correct solution. If you have one point one side and another point very far away from the other information, then automatically you are asking the computer to have a large sort of assumption in extrapolating or interpolating values, then your solution would be far away from what you're really wanting. So a fine grid always classifies or always guarantees you better solution. But are you capable of giving a fine grid depends on your computational power. So this is the first part, grid generation. Okay. So in finite difference method, you can specify finite locations, or in finite volume method, you may need to specify specific control volumes. I'll come to that. What is control volume and finite points? Okay. Okay. Now, the second one I already told you, discretization is required. Discretization means converting the partial differential equations into linear algebraic equation, which the computer can solve. Okay. So linear algebraic equations, as you say, no, it is linear. Partial differential equations are non-linear. Okay. So, when you convert non-linear equations to linear equations, as you saw here, you may lose information, which is called as numerical error. And other than that, when you neglect round off values, like if you take only 2 decimal points, if you take 3 decimal points, what happens with other decimal points? They are coming as numerical errors, round off errors. Okay. Numerical errors combined with round off errors will take you very far from the real solution. You have to be very careful in selecting the type of function, and also you have to be very careful when you round off values in computational fluid dynamics. Okay. So let us discuss all the other things. Okay, let me complete the other ones also. Now, if you have a set of linear algebraic equations, now you have a set of linear algebraic equations which you have converted from partial differential equations and ready to give an answer. So how to get an answer? You may require a computer with metric solving capability. You may write your own code in solving the metrics, or you can use a commercial solver which will solve the metrics for you. This is what you actually do when you use ANSYS, Fluent, or some other software. It actually is a metric solver. So you give information at different points. You give the computer a matrix to solve, and it will solve the matrix by some numerical techniques. Okay, it solves by numerical techniques, and these techniques are classified as explicit, implicit, iterative methods. Different sort of names are given. We'll discuss all those things. But basically, it is just a metric solver. How capable the metric solver is to solve such how capable the metric solver is to solve your answer depends on who has written the code, how well he has understood the physics, what sort of numerical technique has been used to solve the metric. Okay, we'll try to understand some of the basic algorithms which go into such metric solve. We'll discuss that. Okay. Is my screen visible to you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, here in the solution methodology, you can write your own code. You can use a solver like ANSYS, okay? But ultimately, you have to select the type of metric solver, okay? this is the problem. This is the main thing that you have to be very careful. You have to solve the type of matrix solver which is capable of solving the problem. So here you may have to understand what sort of physics is being written, what sort of equations have to be solved, and which is the best matrix solver which gives you a solution. So here you need a connect between maths and physics. Okay, you need a connect between maths and physics, which most people don't do that, because of which they will get some solution which they cannot comprehend. Okay, so first you understand physics, use mathematics to solve physics, and you again have to use mathematics to understand or physically visualize what happened with the flow. So there are many such stages involved which you have to go through patiently. Now the next one is, once you have a result, you may have to do a post-processing. Okay, this post-processing, you have a set of information after you solve the problem. It may be sort of some color graph or something like that. You want to see a pressure contour, you want to see a temperature gradient within the field. Now, which type of visualization will help you understand the physics? You may require to draw a XY plot. You may require to visualize it through a set of streamlines, or you may require to visualize through some contours or some vector diagram. So these are the ways in which you can visualize the field or the flow solution once you solve it. So this is called as post-processing. After solution, do the processing to understand the physics. So experimentally, if you do it, you can visualize, see by eyes. But if you want to computationally do it, you may require a computational visualizer. Streamline vector plot or contours are all computational visualizers, which tell you what happened with the flow, what happened with the physics. Okay, so this is where you may appropriately use post-process. Sometimes a two-dimensional plot, XY plot, may be required. Sometimes a three-dimensional plot is required. It depends what you're trying to see. Okay. Now, the last stage, as I told you, is testing and validation or verification. Okay, it depends. If you want to do testing on your own, if you want to validate with somebody's experiments, if you want to verify with somebody else's simulation, it depends on your capability and your time and money. Okay. So, having said that, just remind me if I am passing the time, surpassing the time. Please remind me. So is this okay? The pace and the way I explain things, is it okay for you guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Fine.
Okay. So now let us come to topic 1. So topic 2 is discussed here, because topic 1 I thought I would write it on my own and try to explain on screen. So topic 1 in your brochure, which I promised to cover you, was the fluid dynamics or the basic fluid dynamics before going into computational fluid dynamics. So today, let me cover fluid dynamics. Tomorrow, I will go on with the other parts of the brochure. I am not yet very comfortable with the digital way of writing on the with pen and the pad. Okay. Because of which there could be some jarring effect. Please pardon. So let us try to understand fluid dynamics first. Okay. So fluid flow. Okay, fluid flow. Many types of fluid flow can be. Okay, let me explain some of them. One is laminar. Another one is turbulent. Okay. So let us see what is laminar flow. So laminar, what is the difference between laminar and turbulent flow? So accordingly, you have to write the equation. This is why I am taking some time to explain the different types of flows. Okay. So in laminar flow, the orientation of the fluid particle, if you have different fluid particles, A, B, So I'm just going into detailing small fluid particles which are in flow or in dynamic motion. Okay. So basically, let me first explain what is the difference between dynamics and kinematics. Okay. In kinematics, you will study about the flow without even thinking about what causes the flow, without even thinking about what is the prime mover, what is the force which causes the flow. Okay. In fluid dynamics, you really want to know what really caused the flow. What is the prime mover? What was the force which caused the flow? So in dynamics, you have both the elements of acceleration, velocity, that sort of parameters. Additionally, you want to think about what are the forces which is causing the flow. So then it is fluid dynamics. Okay. So let me say two particles are there, A and B, which are moving, and another particle C and D are in motion just below it. Okay, just below it. They always keep their relation of motion intact. Okay, A doesn't want to overtake B, A doesn't want to come in between C and D. Okay, which means that the flow is in laminae, or word meaning sheet. They flow sheet over sheet. Okay, this is laminar flow. And you understand that it is almost an ideal condition in which you can expect a laminar flow. Okay. So laminar flow, unless otherwise, the physics is very simple. The flow doesn't happen that way. Okay. So this is laminar flow. There is no supersedence, or the fluid particles doesn't try to overtake each other. Okay. They are in relative motion, which is kept intact always, as in sheet flow. In the other case, in turbulent flow, they started with fluid particles here. Okay. The fluid particles were in order initially, and they go on zigzag motion. After some time, A is here, and after some time, B is here. Okay, after some time, C is here. So now the entire flow is chaotic. Okay, now the flow is chaotic. You cannot describe the flow physics with simple equations. Then you require a mathematical model which predicts chaos. This modeling is known as turbulence modeling. Okay, this modeling is known as turbulence modeling. You want to predict what happens with the flow when the fluid motion is completely chaotic. Okay, so in laminar flow, you require one type of solution. In turbulent flow, you require another type of flow solution, which can predict chaos, or sometimes in some way it can mathematically include probability or chaos in it. Okay, so two types of flows can be laminar and turbulent. Accordingly, the equation can be written. Now, another type of flow is compressible or incompressible flow. I'm having difficulty writing compressible and incompressible flow. Okay. So here, the important aspect is flow velocity. Okay. If you want to detail compressible and incompressible flow, the flow velocity is important. And the flow velocity is related with sound speed in detailing such flows. And for incompressible flows, the Mach number is usually less than 0.3. And for compressible flows, if the Mach number is greater than 0.3, you can select a compressible solver or compressible fluid physics. You can say that the fluid physics is going compressible. Why this demarcation is happening? Why this sort of demarcation is happening for incompressible and compressible flow? So in order to understand that, you need to know how information is passed between fluid particles. Okay, how information is passed between fluid particles. You imagine there is an obstruction kept here. And a fluid flow is happening near to the object where the solid body is kept. Okay, one fluid particle is here, another fluid particle is here. Okay, they are all going to meet this solid body. Okay. Now, this is the fluid particle which has got information about the presence of the solid body in its route, in its path. That information will be passed to its neighbors at the speed of sound. the information will be passed to its neighbors at the speed of sound. Because sound is a mechanical vibration in the medium, and this is a mode of information that being passed to its neighbor. It says that there is an obstruction here, okay? And fluid, like any flowing object, it's always interested in taking the least resistance path, and they have to take a diversion because the solid body is in this obstruction, okay? So this sort of information, Mach number, as you say, it is a classification of fluid velocity against the speed at which the availability of information of an obstruction is there, or the speed of sound in the medium. Okay, so this is the flow velocity, and this is the you can say a feedback of an information which is informing the neighbors about the presence of a solid body there. So speed of sound. So if you relate this, you call this value m as Mach number. Okay, so Mach number is nothing but a ratio of fluid flow velocity to information, the sound speed in that medium. So if this is less than 0.3, you can say that the flow is basically incompressible. Okay, so what happens if this Mach number is greater than 1? Okay, so a fluid particles comes, okay, there's an obstruction here. A fluid particles comes. So I will first explain what is happening at the limiting, okay, this approaching with some velocity. There's an obstruction here, and it is trying to pass the information at the speed of sound. If exactly v is equal to a, okay, you have a Mach number which is 1, which is sonic speed for the flow, and the information about an obstruction is available just as the flow reaches there. Okay, so the adjacent fluid particles will be in confusion. They don't have enough time to divert or deviate from the flow path. So if this, so when we take another consideration, when Mach number is greater than 1, that is, velocity is much greater than the sound speed, there is actually no information available for the presence of an obstacle there. Then what happens? It is just like asking everybody to run through the same door at the same time in a movie theater which has got fire. Okay, so so there is a cluttering of fluid particles at the region of obstruction. Okay, at the region of obstruction, there causes a cluttering of the fluid particles because they never had an information that there is an obstruction there. So this is known as shock wave. This is a very thin section of fluid of overlapping information, which is called as shock wave. And shock wave is nothing but an overlapping sound speed information, sound waves. Okay, so whether the flow is compressible, you will have information about overlap. You will have information overlap, which you call as shock, to be predicted in the fluid flow. If it is incompressible, you don't have such phenomena. So two different types of equations have to be solved in whether the flow is incompressible or it is compressible. So the physics is different. The type of solvers will be different. Type of boundary conditions will be different to solve. Okay. Now, did you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. And now another important one is irrotational and rotational flow. Very important to know this. Okay. Irrotational or rotational flow. So let me try to explain this. So you have a region of I'm just drawing a flat plate for simplicity. And there is a flow approaching here, the flat plate. Okay. There is a flow approaching the flat plate with some velocity v. Okay. The flow sees a flat plate here, and due to adhesion, the fluid particles get stuck to the plate. So one layer of fluid particles is always stuck to the plate. Okay. One layer of fluid particles is always stuck to the plate, and it gets stuck. I will draw it enlarged. That stuck fluid particles, I will draw it enlarged. These are the fluid particles which are stuck to the plate. Okay, they cannot move. Okay, they cannot move. This condition is called as no slip condition. It's a physical condition in which the fluid particles of a different type of molecule is getting attracted to solid body, which is another type of molecule, because of adhesion, the principle called as adhesion, molecular attraction. Okay, now they cannot move. Okay, so another layer of fluid particle comes here and tries to pass over this molecules which are already stopped. Okay, so because of cohesive nature of attraction between the molecules, there is attraction between these two molecules. These molecules are not permitting, these fluid elements are not permitting this to move as fast as it wants. It was very fast here, it was moving very fast, freely here, but it is not able to move because the other neighbors are bringing it down, they are slowing it down. So they cannot move as fast as possible. Okay, think about other molecules. They have already some increase in velocity compared to the particles which are stuck. So they are comparably free to move. Similarly, the molecules on top are much more free to move. And some region you find a molecule is just in the same velocity of it is what it is approaching. Okay, it can move as easily as it was coming. So this sort of gradient in velocity exists when there is a solid body in contact. Okay, this sort of gradient exists when solid body is in contact. So if you want to draw a velocity profile, if you want to draw a velocity profile, it may look like this. It starts with zero velocity at the plate. It starts with zero velocity at the plate. It can go up to a velocity which is what you call as free stream velocity, which is undisturbed velocity. So no slip condition at the plate, no slip condition at the plate, to no slip condition at the plate to a free stream condition much above the plate. So there is a velocity gradient, the profile we can draw with a gradient. So if you want to draw, if this is a y axis and this is x axis, okay, there can be a component of the velocity with the direction. Though this is non-zero, this is non-zero. You have a gradient available. Okay. So let us go into detail on what happens with the elements here, which is having gradient, where there is a gradient in the flow field. Whenever there is a gradient in the flow field, you see that they are counteracted by some fluid particles which are moving faster on the top. Okay, some fluid particles which are moving faster on the top, and other fluid particles which are moving slower on the bottom. So there is a spinning action for every fluid element. There is a spinning action for every fluid element which is in the gradient zone. This is called as rotational motion of the fluid element. So such flows are called as rotational flows. Whenever there is a whenever there is rotational motion for fluid elements about its own centroid locations, you can say the flow is rotational. And there is an influence of viscosity which will cause this rotationality of the fluid element. Which means that for rotational flows, viscous set of equations should be solved. Viscous flows should be solved. What is causing this rotationality? The fluid attraction to each other, which is viscosity, is causing this. So for rotational flows, viscous flow equation should be solved. Viscosity parameter, mu, what we call as viscosity, is important in model. It has to be modeled in the fluid physics. Viscosity has to be modeled in the fluid physics for rotational flows. So outside the rotational zone, you can see that the fluid molecules are moving, fluid elements are moving without any rotation. They're moving freely at the same condition. So this is called as irrotational zone. Irrotational zone. So here, you don't want to model viscosity, or you don't want to model viscosity as such. So such flows are called as inviscid flows. So if you see any commercial solver, there will be a point where you have to select whether the flow you are solving is viscid or inviscid. So irrotational flows are called as inviscid flows. Inviscid. Rotational flows are called as viscous flows. Okay. Normally, when you say flow, you have to model viscosity also. But if it is specifically said inviscid flow or rotationality is not important, then you can take inviscid flow equations, or such equations are called as Euler's equation, Eulerian flow. Euler's equations can be solved. If you want to solve viscous flow equations, the set of equations that you have to use is called as Navier-Stokes equation, which has viscosity also into the equation. Okay. So Navier-Stokes, are you going to solve Navier-Stokes equation? Are you going to solve Euler's equation? Depends on whether the flow is rotational or rotational. Is this clear?
Fine, sir.
Okay. Oh, fine. So we have discussed the different types of flows. Now let's try to discuss. Let me ask me to stop when the time is up, or you want to leave. Okay, that's fine for me. So another thing I want to explain before going into the computational fluid dynamics is the conservation laws. Okay, conservation laws. Very difficult to write about this. So here, the conservation laws can be of mass conservation, okay, or it can be of momentum conservation. I will write only the important ones. Okay. I'm writing this because I need this sort of equations later when I explain the solver settings in a commercial solver or something like that. So energy conservation, I will go only up to that. Species conservation, I will not write. Mass, momentum, and energy. So all this conservation laws can be written in two different frameworks. Okay, all the conservation laws can be written in two different frameworks. There are more frameworks. Okay, I will explain only two important frameworks, which is very common. Okay, so I'll write all frameworks of equation. So all these equations can be written in two different frameworks. One is, so I'll write equations in two frameworks. Okay, one framework is Lagrangian framework. Very difficult. Another one is Eulerian framework. Some people call it Euler. I'll call it Eulerian framework because that's a very commonly used pronunciation. Eulerian framework. So whether you want to write the equation of conservation or whatever equation that you're going to write for fluid flow motion in Lagrangian framework or Eulerian framework depends on the type of physics. Okay, type of physics. For example, let me think that the flow solution I am looking for is for a spray. A spray, the solution is looked for a spray. Okay, I have a needle here and spray particles are coming out of the needle. Okay. And let me count the number of droplets which are coming, say around 20 or 2000 or 20,000 droplets are coming in an ambient space. There is an ambient space in which I have near about 20,000 droplets coming out, which is countable. I can count it, which means that this spray is dilute spray. For me, this is a very dilute spray. I can count the number of fluid with a high-speed photography. I can capture the number of droplets which is coming out of it. So I can really track the position and speed, velocity, or the deposition of this type of spray. If I have a particle-to-particle tracking, it is possible. So such modeling, where it is possible to track particle by particle, is called as Lagrangian particle. I can travel with the fluid particle, and I can write the physics of the fluid particle, basically by saying that, okay, this is the position of the fluid particle. The velocity of the fluid particle will be the time derivative of position. Sorry. So, okay, I say that the velocity of the fluid particle or the droplet here for my concern is the time derivative of the position of the particle. Okay. So I get a velocity vector. So if I want to find acceleration, it is nothing but the second derivative of the position vector, or it is the first derivative of the velocity vector at that position. Okay. So Newtonian laws, Newton's equations are applicable in Lagrangian framework. Okay. So in Fluent or some modeling software, you see that discrete particle method is there, DPM model is there to track fluid physics for sprays modeling and all. They actually do some sort of Lagrangian approach for tracking the individual fluid particles, which are coming out of the spray model or the position. So here, basically, you understand that Newton's equations are written. Newton's equation is written for tracking the flow, basically tracking particle by particle. So this is Lagrangian frame. Okay, you can do this as long as it is possible with having enough computational power. If you don't have that, you can, and if the physics doesn't permit you to do that, if the fluid physics is continuum, okay, if the fluid physics is continuum, you have a lot of particles. Fluid physics is in continuum, and the flow is so close by. Okay, you cannot track one particle over the other. Then it is not possible to establish a Lagrangian framework. Then you need a fixed reference. So I'll use another color. Then you need a fixed reference of observation, which is called as control volume. So here it is control mass. Okay, each particle was a mass which has to be tracked. So it is a control mass approach in Lagrangian framework. But here in Eulerian framework, where you cannot make distinction from one particle to another, there are so many, they are close together, they are flowing in continuous regime. So you need a region of observation or region of measurement is required to detail the equation, where you go with a control volume. And you just observe what happened with the fluid as it entered the control volume and what happened when the fluid left the control volume. So individually, the fluid particle is not tracked. What happened at the boundary of the region of space you are observing, that is important, which makes writing equations very easy, because now you have a fixed region of space where you know exactly what happened when the fluid crossed the part, a bunch of or a bulk fluid crossed the control surface from either left to right or right to left or top to bottom, whatever it is. Then it is very easy to write equations. You don't want to track individual fluid particles. So this is called as Eulerian approach, for which you need control volumes. Okay, basically, our computational fluid dynamics permits both Lagrangian approach and Eulerian approach. It is up to you to select which approach is better to your problem. So in some cases, even with sprays or modeling discrete particles, if the particles are so many, then you can even think about assuming the spray to be a continuous field. And then the spray can also be modeled as a Eulerian field. Then you want to couple with some fluid physics or ambient physics, then it is called as Eulerian physics or Eulerian coupling. Okay. So if you want to couple the physics with what happened for this field, there is air here, which is Eulerian. And you have spray here, which is Lagrangian. You can couple Lagrangian with Eulerian with Eulerian. So it depends on how you are detailing the flow physics. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So such things are available in your solver. When you try to go and pick your solver, it will ask what sort of coupling or Eulerian physics or Lagrange discrete particle model. So if it is, are you going to track the particle? Are you going to give a Eulerian approach in your modeling? So you have to understand so some people even write codes for Lagrangian approach to be connected with Eulerian, like there is a coupling between two different physics, multi-physics problem. Okay, so please understand, when two physics interacts or you have a multi-physics problem, one physics can be Eulerian, one physics can be Lagrangian. Both physics can be Eulerian. Okay, it depends. Okay. Do you want me to continue? I can continue, or you want to leave? Now it is 6 o'clock.
Sir, continue, sir.
Is it okay with everyone?
Yes, sir.
Fine, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now,
Continue.
so having said that, we understood what are the different types of fluid flow motion. We understood the different types like laminar, turbulent, how different they are. We understood what is rotational fluid, why they are irrotational, why it is not irrotational at some regions. So how viscosity influences rotationality, what sort of equations is required to detail rotationality. So when you say Euler equation, automatically it comes to mind you have dropped viscosity and the flow is inviscid. When you say Navier-Stokes equation, automatically viscosity has to be modeled and rotationality comes into picture without any doubt. And then you moved on to compressible, incompressible flows, and we understood that compressibility is detailed in way the information of the presence of a obstruction is available in the flow field by virtue of the ratio connecting it with flow speed with respect to the information at which feedback is available, that is sound speed. So above Mach number 0.3, compressibility effects comes into picture, and you may need a different set of equations to detail the computation, the fluid dynamic aspects. And then we come to understand what are the different types of frameworks in which you can write equations. And I told you two basic frameworks, which is Lagrangian and another one is Eulerian framework. I told you why Lagrangian framework is preferred in some modeling like dilute sprays, where Eulerian framework is more preferred for continuous regime, and the flow field is continuous, and you cannot make any distinction of discrete particles. So in one approach, the mass is tracked, controlled mass is tracked, and you have exactly Newton's equations telling you what is the velocity acceleration at a particular point. And Rangakuta methods and other higher order methods can be used to update the particle position at every time. And you may need additional physics also in writing the equation. Why, on the meanwhile, for continuous flow regime, you can take a Eulerian framework to write your equations, and such flow equations are called as viscid flows. Okay, sorry, I'm really sorry. Eulerian flows which are using control volumes approach. Okay, here control volume is a fixed region of space through which your fluid flow passes by, and you take information only of the boundaries or the control surface information, so what happened when the fluid passed by. So when it passes over the fluid surface, you take measurements or you write equations to take measurement what happened at the boundaries. So individually, you are not tracking any fluid particle. It's a collective value that you're assigning to or tracking at a particular boundary, which is very easy to write equations, which is very easy to describe physics. And since you know the fluid is in continuum. Okay, this is what we have discussed up to now. Okay. Now, sorry, I will not prefer Malayalam because many people are there who are from other states. So, having said that, let me detail about conservative form of equations and non-conservative form of equations. So the governing equations, okay, governing equations can be in form, in any of the form, okay. It can be in any of the form, conservative form or non-conservative form. Please let me know if it is taking it all on your energy level. Okay, you can leave if you want. I will not hold you on to you. Okay. So conservative form and non-conservative form. Okay. Very important to know this classification, because the way in which the solver solves the problem for you has to be either in any of this form. conservative or non-conservative form. You can write a physics in non-conservative form. You can write a physics in conservative form. So what is the difference between that? Okay. What is conserved? Okay. What is conserved? Let me write. So let me write. So I would, without explanation, let me write conservative form is control volume approach. And non-conservative form is control mass approach. So I use control volume approach in writing conservative form of governing equations. I use control mass approach in writing non-conservative form of equation. So let me give you an example of what it is, what I'm trying to tell you. Because when I discuss about convection diffusion, 1D convection diffusion equation, it is very important. You know this, okay? Without knowing this, you will not be able to understand why it is written in that form. So I told you governing equations can be written in conservative or non-conservative form. Conservative form is control volume approach, and non-conservative form is control mass approach. So let me say what. Let me try to explain you what this is. So the one governing equation I am trying to take example is conservation of mass. Okay. So I have a flow that is happening. I have a flow that is happening. Okay, just happening. It's a flow. Now I have a region of space which is under my observation. Okay, so this is my control volume. Whenever I say that I have a region of space under observation, it means that I have a region of space which can have a physical boundary which is real or imaginary. That boundary need not be real always, can be imaginary boundary. But that region of space, even with that is imaginary, has a fixed location. I am looking at that part, okay, very carefully. So this is my control volume. So this is my control volume. I am observing this region of space very closely. What happens to the fluid as it crosses the control volume? Okay, that control volume, the boundary, which you call its control surface, can be irregular in shape. It may not be regular also. So within this control volume, I have small elementary volumes. Okay. Within this control volume, I have small elementary volumes, and I call them dV, elementary volume dV. Okay. And you see that this control volume is constituted by this elementary control volumes, dVs. There are so many dVs, which is permitting fluid to pass through. Okay. And without any explanation, let me draw as elementary surface. Elementary surface in that control volume, I call it dA. I call that as dA, elementary control volume, and control surface. Okay. And pertaining to this surface, I see that at this surface, there is the flow is crossing at some angle with a velocity vector v. Okay. When I observe that control surface, that part of the surface, the flow is crossing with some velocity v at some angle. I'm not sure what angle. Okay, I'll just draw that. And this control surface has a normal vector pointing in some other direction. Okay, control surface has a normal vector pointing to some other direction. Okay, and this control volume as a whole is having so many control volumes, and the control volume is having so many control areas, control surfaces. Okay, they are related in that way. Control volume, elementary control volumes, and then control surfaces for elementary control volumes. Now I want to write mass conservation equation or conservation of mass equation for this control volume. Okay, basically conservation of mass is very simple. It says that the net change in mass within the control volume should be equal to 0, which means that whatever flew in should have gone out. There should not be any accumulation of mass. This is what it says. Okay. So let me write what it says. It says that okay, if there should not be any accumulation of mass. So I will write first equation for mass. So density into volume should give me mass. This is for elementary control volumes. So which means that I need to do a triple integral or volume integral of such small elementary control volumes, and the rate of change of this quantity with respect to time alone, okay, the change, what happened with the time, with respect to the time, whatever quantity has been done, it should have passed through, okay, it should have passed through the elementary control surfaces. Whatever happened, the rate of change within this body should have gone through the boundary surface walls. It should have gone through it. So if I want to write that mathematically, it happened through the areas. It happened through the areas. So I'll do an area integral. Okay. I'll do an area integral of, you know, that rho AB. Okay. Rho AB, kilogram per meter cube, meter square, rho A, meter per second. We see that it is kilogram per second, rate of change of mass. Okay, so this is what we are looking for. So rho A V. You see the units, kilogram per meter second. This is what we are looking for. So when you say rate change of mass, that is what we are looking for. So I am going to write rho AV, okay, density. Now they are vector quantities. Area and velocity are vector quantities. So I should write the flow velocity that is aligned with the area vector, area normal vector, because if it, the area can be resolved into normal direction, tangential direction. There is no flow across the tangential direction because it will be within the surface of the control volume. It cannot leave the control surface. So what leaves the control surface is the normal vector pointing out. So I would write the dot product of velocity in the normal direction of the vector, area vector. Okay, so this is what I am looking for. Okay, whatever flew out, whatever went out through the area normal vector is what has caused a change in mass within the control volume. So one is volume integral on one side, one is area integral on the other side. And we have taken a control volume to write this. So it is a control volume approach, and the result should be conservative form of equation. Okay. Now, is this clear? Is this clear, guys?
Yeah, fine, sir.
Is it fine? No? Is it?
Okay, sir. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So now, here, the conservative form of equations or the control volume approach always is dependent on Gauss divergence theorem, because you see that here you have an area integral which you can write as volume integral using Gauss divergence theorem. So this part, the right hand side part, I am going to write with Gauss divergence theorem. Okay, so Gauss divergence theorem. So what I'm trying to relate so many things in one sentence, because please understand that why it is called conservative law, conservation form of equation. This is what I want to tell you. And they are dependent on integral form of equations. Conservation form of equations are integral form of equation. They are dependent on Gauss divergence theorem. So on the right hand side, you see there is an area integral. For area integral, you can relate with volume integral. Okay, I'll write first the area integral. This is what has to be done, area integral. And this is basically according to Gauss divergence theorem. It is nothing but volume integral of divergence of the quantity. Okay, it is divergence of the quantity which for which you have taken area integral when considered to the entire volume. Okay, this is as per Gauss divergence theorem. Now you see that on the left hand side, on the right hand side, you have both volume integrals. Okay, you have on the left hand side, this is now volume integral of divergence. This is Gauss divergence here. Okay, divergence of this one. Okay, divergence of this quantity. So now I'll write that. I'll just take 10 minutes of your time and then leave after explaining this. We got as volume integral. Okay, so for volume integral, I usually prefer to put triple integral with B underneath. Okay, divergence of okay. Now we can take both of this to one side because they are volume integral. Okay, and I take the integral dt inside the integration because the control volume doesn't change its, and we'll go to that. You see here, the control volume, what we are talking about, dV, is a fixed control volume in space, and it doesn't change its dimension over time t, or it doesn't change its dimension. So I'm going to consider this being a constant. I can take it out of the integration. Okay. So this is why I can bring, with respect to time, there is no change for the quantity dV. Okay. So I will plainly write both the terms. Since the control volume dimension doesn't change over time t, okay, I can take it out and I can write this way. So the basic thing I have done is I can taken the time derivative inside the integral only because there is no change in dV over time t. Okay, so you see this is control volume approach. Okay, this is the equation that is given by control volume approach or mass conservation. You see that it is an integral form of equation. The mass conservation is given from an integral form through control volume approach. Okay. Now you see that all small volumes here, if you think about shrinking this control volume, if you go on shrinking this control volume to small elementary volumes, this equation should still be applicable because you never defined how much the control volume should be in size. Okay, you never defined what should be the size of the control volume. A big control volume, a small control volume, elementary control volume, all are control volumes. You can go on shrinking the size, and the equation should still be applicable unless the continuum is valid. This is the only condition. So the kernel size, the volume size, you can go on shrinking till the continuum is valid. Okay, for which it means the integral form of this equation is also true if you just take out the integral because it is applicable for all control volumes. So I can even write this equation, okay, d rho by dt for all dV or elementary control volumes, which means that this equation, the integral form for the big control volume, is also applicable in the differential form for small control volumes. Okay, so the integral form of equation is still valid in its differential form. This is why you say that you can connect differential form of equations to the integral form of equations for conservation quantities when you take control volume approach. Okay, so both are correct. And just to wind up what we are trying to tell, what is conserved? Okay, what is conserved? Okay, in conservative approach, what is conserved? You see here, are you all the other side, or have you most of you left the class? I'm not very sure.
No, sir. No, sir.
It usually happens with online class. We don't know who is on the other side. Okay. So are you all there?
Yes, sir.
I'll just take only 6 left.
Yes, sir.
I'll take just 5 minutes. I'll just take 5 minutes.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So I started off telling you what is conservative, what is conserved, what is not conserved. So in order to explain this, I took an example of conservation of mass, and I tried to explain in terms of control volume approach. Initially, I told you that control volume approach will give you conservation law, conservative form of equation. Okay, and control mass approach can give you non-conservative form of equation. Okay. Then I tried to explain how conservation of mass can be detailed with a controlled volume approach, and we came to an integral form of equation. And I told you that conservative form of equations are always related with Gauss divergence theorem, and inherently they are conservative. That is what I am coming to now. And we saw that in integral form, it is encompassing the entire control volume. You are writing equation for the entire control volume. And this triple integral form or control volume form is also applicable at this lowest level till continuum is valid. So I told you that integral form of equation is also true for control volumes in its smallest form. So integral form of equation can also be treated as differential form of equation. When you consider the control volumes shrunk, only thing is that continuum should be valid. Continuum should be valid. That is the only thing. Now you have two different type of equations, either integral form or differential form. Both are giving the same. And I am concerned about this part. I am concerned about this part. See this part. It tells me divergence of some quantity. In order to understand what does it mean, you should understand what is del operator. A very powerful guy, he can do wonders. Okay, del operator he is called. Okay, del operator. So let me feed him a scalar. I am going to feed him a scalar. So let me feed him with density, or let me feed him with velocity, which is very easy to understand. Velocity in one direction, one component of velocity, which is scalar. So x component of velocity. It can be pressure also, it can be temperature also, it can be anything, scalar. X component of velocity. I am going to feed this guy with a scalar. Okay, and this del operator has this expansion. He is waiting for operating. Whoever comes into his hands, he will operate it. Okay, what sort of operation, what surgery you perform depends on what are you going to give it. He is the guy. Okay, del operator is waiting there. You are feeding him a scalar. He returns you the answer. He returns you. Okay, you give him a scalar, he returns you a vector. Okay, so let me feed him another scalar. Let me feed him pressure. He gives me okay. So are you able to hear me, guys? Somebody saying that unable to hear me. Am I clear?
Yes, sir. It's clear.
Okay. So I was telling you, del operator is a powerful mathematical operator. He is ready to perform a function, an operation on a value that you give him. You give him a scalar, he returns you vector. And let's see what vector he returns. He returns gradient vectors. He returns gradient pressure in one x direction. You call this gradient of pressure. Gradient of pressure in x direction. This part is gradient of pressure in y direction. Similarly, this part is gradient of pressure in z direction. Similarly, gradient of velocity in one direction, gradient of velocity in another direction, gradient of velocity in the third direction. Which means that he tells you how potential a scalar is in different directions. The operator, del operator, performed on a scalar tells you how potential exists between different directions. Basically, this is very important to know how, in which direction a flow or which direction temperature gradient exists, because always flow happens with respect to gradient. So see how important this operator when in its gradient form. So this is called as grad function. When you say plainly apply the del operator, this is called as grad operation. Grad u, grad p. It tells you what gradient exists in different directions. Okay, I hope it is clear. Now you give this del operator a vector. You give him a vector, and you ask him to perform dot operation. Okay. So already this del operator is having I dou x out. It's very difficult to write this. This is not my original handwriting. Please don't mistake me for a novice. Okay. I usually write well on board. But with this pen, I am finding it very difficult. So these are the two vectors in operation, and I want to perform a del operation. This is called as del operation. The other one is grad operation. This is called as del operation. So I want to find del v or of del dot v. Okay. So divergence operation. I'm sorry, divergence operation. Divergence operation. So this is del operator. When it is taking a dot product of a vector, it gives me for this particular. It gives me plainly it means that it gives me directional scalars of a vector. Directional spatial variations of the scalars of a vector. So it says that why I say directional, u with respect to x, v with respect to y, w with respect to z. This is the derivatives it is going to give me. Okay. Sorry. Yes.
Sir, this operator, del operator, if we give input a scalar, then it gives us this gradient.
Gradient vector.
And if we
It also
give
gives
input,
you magnitude and direction.
sir, and if we give input as a vector, then it gives us divergence.
Yes, it gives divergence. Yes. And divergence is this is going to be a scalar quantity. You can see there is no directional preference. There is no specific direction. It's going to return a scalar. The del operation on dot product on a vector gives you a scalar, returns a scalar. And the scalar, if you see, they are each component is a gradient in the respective direction. See the if you draw that velocity vector here. So if there is a velocity vector, and this is u part, which is a scalar, and this is v part, which is a scalar, and this is x, okay, and this is y direction. So the change of u with respect to x in the same direction, plus change of v with respect to y in the same direction. Similarly, if you have a third perpendicular direction, z, change of w with respect to y is z in the direction. So the gradients are in the respective directions, and it is returning a scalar. Okay. Okay. Now you give the del operator a vector and ask him to perform a curl operation. Curl operation. You take a cross product. So it is like asking him to perform epoch and turn. Epoch and turn. You curl it. Whatever I give you, you curl. If you give a velocity field, you turn that velocity field. That is what you're asking the operator to perform. Okay. So when you're asking a del operator to perform a curl operation, you are actually asking a field function to be turned at a point. Okay, curl operation. So let me try to explain that. So for that, I may require I, J, K here. Okay. Then I have dou by dou x here. I have dou by here. I have dou by dou z here. Then the components of velocity here. So the curl operation tells me I, okay, dou w by dou y minus dou u, dou v by dou z plus j, the minus of minus. Yeah. Dou w divided by dou x minus dou u by dou z plus a into dou v by dou x minus dou u by dou y. You see here, the curl operator will give you this a spin and turn operation, a poke and turn operation. Why I am saying a poke and turn operation? Please think that you want to draw only a 2D flow. Then it will be very clear. If you want to draw only 2D flow, so let me write 2D flow. For 2D flow, U is present and P is present. W is absent. The third component is absent. Okay. Or in two-dimensional plane, the flow is happening. Only components are there in X and Y direction for the flow. So here W is basically absent. So I can take this, to make you understand why it is poke and turn. So W part goes out. Okay. The third axis doesn't exist. So any derivatives in the third axis doesn't exist. This also goes out. This also goes out. Basically, you are left with curl operation in 2D plane. You are left with the k cap dou v by dou x minus dou u by dou y. Okay, so you see here the flow happened in two-dimensional plane, which is xy. But the curl operator is returning a vector in the z-axis. Okay, in the z-axis. So it is returning as a vector in the z-axis, which is curl velocity in the z-axis. So the spin operation, so you see here it is having a positive quantity in the z-axis, which means that the rotational vector should be in this fashion. Then only by right-hand screw rule, the curl velocity will be pointing out. Okay, you understand the right-hand thumb rule? In order to draw a vector for a rotational quantity, the vector we can use right-hand thumb rule. It is like unwinding a right-handed screw. So the curl operation should actually be rotating counterclockwise to permit the curl vector to be pointing out in the plane perpendicular to what I am drawing now. So which means that somebody has poked in the z from the z-axis and turned it, the velocity field. Somebody has turned it. Who has turned it? Curl operator has turned it. The del operation, when you perform the curl operation, turn the velocity vector. So which means that this curl velocity field or curl vector always points to the third perpendicular axis. Okay, and it is a poke and turn operation that is performed. Okay, is it clear, guys? Is it clear?
Okay, sir.
If you don't understand, you can tell me. Okay. So now I was trying to explain this part. In order to explain that part, I had to go all the operations that is permissible with del operator. In order to just explain this part, I went to all of the parts which I try to explain: grad, divergence, and del op. So here, what is given here? Divergence of rho v. Okay, divergence of rho v. So let us see what is that. So for that, let me write first rho v. Okay, so the units would be kilogram per meter cube to meter per second. This is kilogram per meter square per second. Okay. So what is basically this? What is basically this? Kilogram per meter square is called as flux, is called as a quantity per unit area per unit time. A quantity which crosses per unit area per unit time is called as flux. Here the quantity which is causing the unit area per unit time is mass, kilogram. Okay, so this part is nothing but mass flux. So flux is something, the name you give for any quantity that crosses unit area per unit time. Okay, so here what is the quantity? Here the quantity is kilogram, that is mass. So actually this part is telling about divergence of mass flux. Okay, the divergence of mass flux. So here let me draw an unit area here. This is an unit area. So something is crossing, mass is crossing this unit area through the surface. It is crossing this unit area, and this quantity is symbolizing that. Okay, divergence of mass flux. Why I wanted to tell you this? Because you have a physical quantity for which the spatial gradient, okay, the spatial gradient is taken. You have a physical quantity for which the spatial gradient is taken, which means that you are talking about some physical quantity. This is why it is called as conservative form. Now you know what to tally, what has to be conserved. Mass flux has to be conserved. Okay, physically you are trying to relate mass flux. So you know what has to be tracked, what is to be conserved, what is being conserved, you know that. But let me write the same equation in another form. I am going to elaborate this part only. Okay, this part remaining the same. I am going to write this part alone, an expansion of it. This would be, the expansion would be B dot grad P, mathematically it would be plus, okay, density into density into, I don't know what is happening. I'll write somewhere. Okay, closely observe this part alone. I am going to write density into divergence of velocity plus velocity dot gradient of, so density being a scalar, del dot rho v can be expanded as density into divergence of velocity plus velocity dot gradient of density. Okay, you see that the operations are performed accordingly. Mathematically, it is permitted to do that. Now you see that now suddenly this becomes unphysical in meaning. We don't know what property has to be tracked. It says that divergence of velocity. For me, if I am going to write divergence of velocity, So here, it would be dou by dou x of unit velocity in one direction. So I would write 2 meter per second divided by meter is what is going to be returned, and 1 by second is given as a returned value. So what does that actually mean? I cannot make anything out of it. Okay, what does it actually physically mean? I don't know. Even though it came from a very meaningful way of writing the equation, which told me about the mass flux being tracked across a spatial location. Suddenly, when I expanded it, it became unphysical in meaning, telling me divergence of velocity. When I expand, I see that it is 1 per second. I cannot make anything out of it. So this type of writing the equation is called as non-conservative form, while this is called as conservative form. Because a non-conservative form never tells you what is the physical quantity on which you are writing the equation. It just gives you mathematical equivalence of the physical quantity in terms of dependent variables. The physical quantity was dependent on density and velocity. It just splits it and tells you the spatial gradients or temporal gradients in terms of the elementary physical, independent variable. So whenever you see an equation which is detailed in terms of elementary independent variables, you have to take into account it is non-conservative form, because you never can track what is being tracked, what physical quantity is being conserved, what physical quantity has been tracked. You cannot say. On the other way, when you write the control volume approach, automatically it gives you the physical quantities which are being tracked. So the conservation laws automatically lead to conservative form of equations. Still, when you elaborate, when you go into detail the derivatives, you can split into elementary variables, and then you get non-conservative form of the equation. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. If it is clear, we can wind up the class for today. Tomorrow I will continue with one more type of equation. Then we'll move on to the computational side of it, because I need that session, because I want to explain to you what is convection diffusion equation and why it is in that form, and why equations have to be written, or why some software methods, algebraic equations are required to elaborate the conversion from partial differential equation to linear algebraic equation in the way it is written there, and how the solvers take it. Okay. So I hope it is required, that session is required. So I'll continue with that. If you have any objection, comments, you can comment on the WhatsApp group. I'll read, accordingly modify my lecture. I'm taking the lecture as I take to my students, and in a very fast manner, because we have limited time. So you please give your feedback. Thank you. Thank you, guys. So let's wind up today's class.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.